Active FM. Radio has never been better.
What is up?
Hey, welcome
This is the movie show,
on your favorite ORSPS,
and we are going to be discussing
a subject instead of a film,
a subject about a film.
about a genre of films.
That's horrible.
Yes. Now, can I just say, I am not a horror fan.
I'm not a horror fan either.
I don't like horror.
I don't like horror either.
I don't enjoy them. I don't like the way they make me feel.
Why would you watch something that is supposed to bring fear into you?
Why would you want to do that?
I don't know.
Why would you do that?
But anyway,
Comment below what you love about horror films. But in the meantime, we're going to tell you, do you think there's any aspiring horror film? I feel like the horror film genre there was a time where it was like the thing to make.
yeah. But also, it's evolved, like, from its roots. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, now you don't just get horrors, you get, like, psychological horrors.
Because weren't horrors always like it was based on
Monsters.
like supernatural stuff, right?
But
right?
now you get different types. So now you get, like, the supernatural side.
Like killers with like a means to kill.
Yeah.
Like they were tortured by policemen. So now they go around and they hunt policemen down. So there's a meaning behind it. And by the end of the film, you're like, oh, shame, poor killer. Aww. But we have to stop him. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
Where
right.
before it was just like, kill him, take him out. And then they take him out and he dies and then the movie ends. And then there's a continuation part 2 when his hand sticks out the grave.
Well, not
and
technically, because, like, Jaws is classified as a horror.
Really?
Yeah. But, like, it's not...
Was there means behind the shark? Wasn't it just sharks in general?
But I feel like, in Jaws, didn't they survive? They ended up killing the shark, right?
I don't know.
I know, I've watched Jaws, but I can't remember the ending. I'm not a horror fan, so I'm not very big. I've done research, but we've done research behind horror. I watched a woman who has a PhD in horror. Yes, that's apparently something you can get. I was like, why would you want a PhD in horror? But anyway, she has a PhD in horror. And there is a technique behind why horror films make you scared.
So
There's actually there is a technique to it. And one thing I will add
almost
is...
like a checklist that they
that they have to
that
follow
helps
through.
push. Yeah.
And then you get different types of scares within a film. So you get jump scares. But, like, if you really want to make, like, a proper horror film, you want to limit your amount of jump scares, because that kind of, like, takes away from... So eventually the audience is just like, oh, your jump scares, it was just so that people would jump. It didn't have any, like... So it was a bunny that jumped out of a hole. But you got people to jump because, like, they didn't expect the bunny to come.
Yeah.
But, like, that was it. What's the point of the bunny?
So the psychology behind... Because get this, right? What is the difference between an action film and a horror? I mean, think about it. An action film, you've got the killer. He's chasing after your hero of the film, and he's going to kill him. He's going to die. And they've attached you to the character. But it's not scary. It's just very action-packed. You're like, no, get him. You understand what I'm saying? And then you get a horror film where you are scared for your life.
Your life. Never mind the main character's life.
So, according to a psychologist that actually wrote a book, obviously a book of his, but the difference is that scary movies are best if they give the viewer a fright as opposed to fear or anxiety. Why? Well, because if you look at what fright is an element of two things together, and that is a surprise and danger put together. If you look at a lot of horror films, like they have that silence moment, and then suddenly something jumps out, and that's the fear. And it's not just the bunny, because when the bunny comes out, you're relieved. But when out comes a killer with a knife, it's the fright, it's the danger, it's the getaway, and that's what makes good horror films. On top of that, they enhance it by a sound design.
Sound design is everything.
Exactly. And then what makes it worse is that to improve your horror film, you try and make it original, so that it's something because then obviously that enhances the fright.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
The surprise.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, audacity, which doesn't make sense. The audacity of the person who's about to get killed. Why? Because they have the ability to be bold, to take risks. The house is dark and they still go and they heard something and they're like, Billy, was that you? And they go further into the house. So that sort of thing, right? There's always a taking us towards the unknown, the unsettling, that build up, and sometimes even something horribly new. All right. So and on top of that, taking things so far that all you want to do is stop watching. Now, you don't get that in an action film. So it's the surprise conjunctioned together, because that's what an and is, right? It's a conjunction.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I learned that this week. And if you add in the danger, a fright and a danger together gives you a fright. There you go. That is the theory behind fright.
Behind a horror.
And that is what a horror film is filled with completely.
Can I be honest? There's a side to a horror film that I agree with, and then there's a side to a horror film that I don't agree with, right? So the whole point of a horror, actually, if you think about it, is just to take the audience on a ride. That's the point of a horror, is you go from moments of like extreme, like, oh my goodness, what's about to happen? And then there's the scare, and then you're like, okay, do you understand? So you're taking your audience on a ride the whole time. But nowadays you get things that are, it's more than just a monster that jumps out of you at the moment that you least expected it, and now you're like running and, oh my goodness, are they going to get away? So like, I can do thrillers. I enjoy thrillers, in fact.
Explain the thriller.
A thriller, I think, a thriller does the ride for you, but I think a thriller's aim is not to end in like death and darkness, and there's almost like, the problem with horror is that the aim of a horror is to make you scared. And with some horrors, what the aim is that by the end of the movie, you think you're done with the movie, right? But the movie's not done with you. That's the point of horror, because it's taken up intellectual space in your mind, and now you keep on thinking about the movie, and in actual fact, what the film's done is it's created a monster in your mind.
Yeah.
So now you're lying awake at bed at night, and now you're thinking about that horror film. Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When do you lie awake in bed at night thinking about that
Yeah.
train almost hit him, and if he didn't jump at that second,
I'm so glad he jumped.
I'm so glad. Or that fight sequence, like, never.
Tomorrow I'm taking a train. No, what am I going to do? Yeah, well, they say what makes it worse is that between fiction and reality is that if you look at most horror films, is that it could actually happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what brings the reality into it. Like you said, you don't watch an action film with a train and then you're like, I don't want to take a train in my life. It's nothing. It's like ends, they won, yay, and that's the end.
I think the reason I personally don't like a horror film is because one of the aims of a horror film is to actually just make you feel unsettled. That's actually at the end of the day what their whole aim is, to just unsettle you. And yeah, so for example, like I was watching a video where it was a similar scene, but the one was it was a film, and the other one was like not a home, but like a short film type of thing. And the one was set in this warehouse. You didn't really know where it was. It was like this big warehouse. The other one was set in a home, and this woman was literally walking from one room to the kitchen, and it was at night. She was in her PJs, so she was in a very like vulnerable position, but also she should be in a safe position because it's her home. And yet he then went on to say which one's scarier, and then explained that the home is the one that was set in at home is actually the one that's more scary, because you're supposed to feel safe. And so that's why they often will set like horror movies in a home or with a family, because then you're now playing with the audiences. This is where you're supposed to feel safe, but in actual fact, you're not feeling safe.
And where else do you run to? Like
yeah,
if it's
that's
in your
the thing.
house, you're like, okay, you're going to run outside. Okay, it's going to come after you. Where are you going to go? Your neighbor? No, your neighbor's not going to open for you. No, but even if you go to your neighbor, this thing's going to follow you and take you and your neighbor out.
Yeah. So I was watching a video, which was actually very unsettling by the end of it. It basically did like this in-depth study of 3 different horror films. But then it was explaining how with each of these horror films, the reason why they're so good is, and then it went into like the psychology behind how these films work. And basically what he said was, number one, when you create a horror film, you need your audience to attach themselves to your characters, because a horror film is much more upsetting and frightening if you as the audience are invested into the characters. And so when things start happening, it's not just a spectacle, but it's actually a betrayal to the characters that you're already invested into. So you're not just watching someone being murdered, you're watching the person that you've learned to like and feel sorry for and have compassion for and all of that. Now they're being killed, and now you're like, oh my goodness, or they're killing. So he said that the emotional connection starts being used against you. That's the whole point of the horror film, is they connect you, there's an emotional connection, and then they use that very thing that they connected you to and then use it against you. So in most horror films, what they do is you don't see the adversary, so you don't see the thing or the spiritual force whatever it is. Instead, you should feel it. And so since the focus so what they'll do is they'll frame it on a family. So all of these 3 films that they went through, all you were focused, you met this family, and then they were set in different times, different places, different families, but you got connected to the family, and you never actually saw the adversary, whether it was this demonic cult thing that someone got involved, whatever, but you felt it. And basically the aim is that you have the adversary hiding within every single frame. Even though you don't see it, you feel its presence. And at first it's very small and doubtful, but as the movie progresses, it grows in size, also with the characters. And so actually what they're doing is they're building the adversary in your mind. They're not actually building it on screen, but they're obviously using what they're showing on screen to build it up within you. So the adversary in these films generally wants your soul. That's what it's after. That's why it's normally like a spiritual being or something, but it's after your soul, and it actually in these films wanted to corrupt you. So it didn't just want to kill you, it wanted to actually corrupt you so that you became the very thing that now other people have to run away from. And then what's worse is it's not the adversary killing you. Instead, it's the adversary that's now taken over the mother, and it's gotten the mother to kill the child. So now that's what they do. So now it's not just the mother watching the child being killed. It's now the mother killing the child, which is now you're like, oh my living soul, what is she doing? So that's the freaky side of it. And so what ends up happening with the horror film is the character either dies or ends up serving the adversary. Those are the only 2 options. And that's why a horror movie is so upsetting, is because there's no hope at the end of the day. You either choose to resist the adversary and then die, or you choose to end up serving the adversary, but then you end up doing what the adversary wants you to do. So just like the characters, the audience needs to be trying to figure this whole thing out, because that obviously will draw the audience in. And then he literally ended off and said, you think that once the movie is finished that you're done with it, but that the movie is actually not done with you, but it stays with you. And you spent the whole movie building a monster in your mind. And the most effective horror movies are the ones that intrude on your psyche and never leave. And for me, I'm like, why would I want that? Why would I want to do that to myself? Now I'm scarred and affected by horror films. And I personally do believe there is a demonic force behind a horror film. Because like you're allowing yourself to be opened up to fear. And for me, fear is... Do you understand what I'm saying? There's only one realm that works with fear, and it's the demonic realm. So if you're opening yourself up to that constantly, then you're opening, you're using it. There's a door, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, think about it. You're watching a film, you're getting attached to a character, and then things happening with the character that you're attached to that is out of your control. Now, if you know how a person works, fear is related to freeze, fright, or run, basically. And now in this whole time with this film, you can't do either. Like your state of mind like kicks into like survival mode type of thing, and you don't have control. So at the end of the day, like if you think about it, you can't really get to any grips or any closure with what's happened, unless of course you watch like Candyman, and Candyman dies at the end. You're like, yes, he's dead. You know, most of these horror films, you just like, they never die.
That's the problem.
They never die.
Yeah.
Like if Candyman dies, then the sun now rises. You know,
Yes.
then there's the son of Candyman, or you know, the boy that got haunted. Eventually, he takes over, or,
But I feel
his
like-
best friend takes over. You know,
I feel
so
like
it's
horrors have changed though. Or maybe they haven't, but
That-
like
old school horrors versus. I mean, the last horror that I watched was Saw, and there are quite a couple of them out, and it's weird because that's not again. It's that thing of if you've ever watched Saw is about a guy who has terminal cancer, and he watches the world around him of people who take life for granted. So what he does is he finds people. So example, he finds a guy who's having an affair, you know, and he's messing up his marriage. And so he sees that person as someone who's taking life for granted. So he gets that guy, he captures him, he puts him in a situation where he has to fight for his life, but he has to sacrifice to fight for his life. In other words, he puts the value back into his life. So example, the one guy, and I don't know if it was the guy who was having an affair on his wife, but he puts a key behind his eye socket, and he's got this almost like bear trap on his mouth, and there's a timer on it, and he's got a certain amount of time. There's a what do you call it? What you cut people open with? A
that thing. I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah,
that one. And it's sitting on the table, and he gives him an amount of time. He has to grab it. He has to cut his eye out, get the key, unlock himself from a bear trap, and get out the room. E.g., another example is he finds people who are drug addicts, and he puts them in a room where they're about to like fall, or I can't remember what happened, into a whole lot of needles where they literally. So it's that kind of horror, but you see how it's gone from like this force into this. The bad guy is doing something with a good cause, which is in a way like pretty twisted if you think about it.
Very twisted.
And I remember watching the first one, and I was like freaked out because of like not all of them get out. So when the bear trap rips open this guy's jaw, finished, you know, you're like, ah! And then I started watching the third one. I think I didn't watch Saw 2, and I just started watching the third one, and then I couldn't. I put it down. I'm like, I don't want to watch this. I actually don't want to watch it. I can't. Yeah, I think that was the last time I watched a horror, and I was just like, because of, like you said, there's a feeling.
Yeah.
There's something that stays with you.
No, there is something that stays with you. But I think, so just if you look at like how to scare people, so what they do is they first of all will give you breadcrumbs. So that's where you're
This is the checklist, guys.
Yeah, this
If
is
you
the
wanted
horror
to-
checklist.
If you want to make a good horror film, which, no, guys, come on.
Okay, this is what they do to you in
Yes,
horror
yes.
films. So they first give you
In fact,
breadcrumbs.
Can I just say, before Sashi gives this list, right? Number one, when you're watching a horror film, when you're watching Billy walking down the passage there, looking for, and the killer's inside, think that in front of Billy is a whole camera crew,
Yeah, there we go.
audio, a director. There's probably a whole lot of guys carrying cables
This was
and
the fifth
clearing the
take.
way. And exactly, and it's probably the fifth take. Great
Yeah,
idea.
there we go.
I like the fifth take. And second of all, think about this list and literally tick them off as you're watching a horror film. So here
Yeah.
we go.
So the first thing is breadcrumbs. So I'll give you an example. There's a movie, I don't even know what it's called. I just know it has a witch in it. But basically what happens is two girls are lying in a bed. The one girl gets up, she sleepwalks to the cupboard, right? And then the girl wakes up and there's this like knocking sound, but now she thinks it's her sister on the cupboard. So that's a breadcrumb, right? You're giving the audience something to go, what is that? Is that often a breadcrumb will be a sound. So in Jaws, the da 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 da, that was a breadcrumb because you didn't see the shark,
great.
but you now like, the shark is coming because of the da da da. So that can be like, yeah. Then there's build up. So there's build up to, okay, she's going towards the cupboard, or okay, they're going towards the thing. And now, as the audience, you're obviously now leaning in because you're waiting to see what is that. And they'll often draw these scenes out. So often it will be like, in fact, in one horror movie, it was a 3-minute scene and the camera didn't move once. Literally, the camera stayed in the same spot once. So you're literally like waiting for 3 minutes. You're waiting for like this thing to jump out and it's not jumping out. And that's what makes a good horror, is the tension that it builds. Alfred Hitchcock, who made the movie Psycho, even said there's no terror in the bang, only the anticipation of it. So it's not the bang that's scary, it's the tension tension then build up to
It's
the
kind
bang.
of like an elastic band.
Yes, and you're waiting for
The
it to like
further
hit
you can stretch it, the more it's
better.
going to go out.
Yeah. So then there's the build up. Then what they do after build up is they misdirect you. So that's the whole thing with the jump scare, for example. And like they said, the amount of times cats have been used in jump scares in horror films. I think they even gave the number. It was like, it's so many times where a cat will be like meow, and you're just like, oh, it was a cat. Okay. Woo. So they'll misdirect you. Then what they'll do is they'll give you limited view. So now as the audience, you can't see everything, and that there's two ways they'll do this. Either by lighting. So in the scene where there was the chick had gone to the cupboard, the room was it was lit dimly. There was only a lamp on. That was the only source of light in the room. So you couldn't see a lot. You could only see immediately what was close. So they'll either use lighting or they'll give you a very obscure camera view. So they don't show a lot in the shots, or they'll keep a lot of the shots in the dark or whatever. So they give you a limited view because now you're like, what's there? I can't see. Or what they'll do is they'll keep the camera with the character. So for example, in The Shining, the boy was riding his bike through the hotel, but the camera was always behind him. So you could never, as the audience, see what's around the corner. And then he turns the corner, and then there were the two girl twins, and he's like, ah! But now you obviously freak out because there's limited view. And then the sting. So the sting is the sound. They call the sound. And it's the sound used the moment you're supposed to be scared. And a sting can only work so well but it can't work well without a good build-up. So, if the build-up's poor, the sting's it's not really going to get you. And then obviously they show you the threat. So, for example, in the one with the girl lying with her I think it was her sister in the bed, she walks up to the girls walked up to the cupboard sleepwalking. So she goes and gets her sister, brings her back to the bed, and then they lie down, but then the knocking continues. But now you're like, it wasn't the sister, because now the sister's back in bed and the knocking's still coming from the cupboard. So now the girl gets up and slowly walks to the cupboard, and now the sister even wakes up, and now you're like, because now she's going to open the cupboard, right? And then what does she do? She opens the cupboard and there's nothing. Yay! See, misdirect you. And then instead the sister looks up and then screams, and the camera pans up, and the whole time the witch was on top of the cupboard and not inside the cupboard. And then there was a very specific sound that they played, which is the sting, when they revealed the threat. So yeah, that's the whole
I bet you our listeners right now they've just pictured what you've just said. They're like, yeah, true, hey? True, hey?
The breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
The breadcrumb. Yeah, so that's basically how
the breadcrumbs.
they scare.
So,
but the thing with horror is some films like action, like music, for example, a romance or drama, you need a beautiful score, and then you're pretty much sorted. Or you need good acting. Whereas with a horror film, you kind of need everything. You need good acting, you need a good music, you need the perfect timing, because if you time it wrong, comedy, you need timing, for example. But with horror, if you time it wrong, either they're not going to get a fright, or the fright's going to come too early, and then you're not going to get the payoff. So literally, it's like with horror, they have to combine everything together in order to bring the cinematography has to be very specific. Otherwise, they see the witch standing in the corner, and then they're like, wait, there's the witch right there. So if they reveal the threat too early, if they show the threat too early, then you're not scared, because you know the witch was on top of the cupboard the whole time.
And that's what sells the film.
Yeah.
Right there is how you've impacted your audience.
That's why people like horror films, because they want to be scared.
I don't understand that though.
Like, go to an amusement
Yeah.
park, jump on a
Yeah.
roller coaster. There we go.
Well,
You leave the roller coaster and that's done. You're not dreaming about the roller coaster. Like, oh, the roller coaster's going to get me.
the psychologist, basically, his definition comes from his book, which he describes the death drive that is as much a part of human nature as the need for pleasure. And the thing is that scary movies seem to inhabit both desires at the same time.
So in other words, they're just watching it.
A drive towards death. And the pleasure is that it's only happening on screen. So that's often why you find a lot of people, they scream and some of them laugh throughout the film, throughout the frightening moments, because it's not
Go eat a
really
chocolate
there.
on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Which apparently, if you're riding a roller coaster, it's about G5. You 5
The
Gs.
force exerted
So
on your body.
you're experiencing a little bit of what astronauts experience. I think that's much better than horror
Yeah.
film. That makes so much sense.
I think that's why I like thriller, because thriller is a ride. So it's the
Mm.
same, it gives off the same ride as a horror, but it's not that chasing death thing. With a thriller, they survive.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So like if you look at A Quiet Place, it's got all of those breadcrumbs.
It's more a
It's got-
story. Yeah, it's more. You see, what I loved about A Quiet Place is that they don't push you that close to the edge.
Yeah.
So it comes to the part where you're like, oh no, I don't like this, and then
And you're holding your breath. You're
And-
literally holding your breath. 'Cause-
and there's a relief, such a relief that happens that it actually releases you, which for me I enjoy. And plus, there's victory over whatever it was that was holding them or keeping them,
yeah, it's satisfying as opposed to unsettling.
Yeah.
So I think that's the aim. Is like a horror. The aim of a horror is to unsettle the
Yeah.
audience. Full stop.
So neither of us, it's actually right, recommend that you go and watch a horror film. But if I can just quickly give you the Hollywood Reporter's top 5, there was a list of 15. I'm only going to give you 5. I don't know why I'm going to give you these 5. But number 5 is The Shining, and check the years, right?
Instead of watching The Shining, go watch Ready Player One.
There you go.
You'll know The Shining from
Done.
Ready Player One.
Yeah, 'cause it's
and
in
Ready
there.
Player One's awesome.
And it's the blood scene with the elevator and everything.
Everything. The
Yeah.
two girls even.
Full on, pretty
everything.
cool, much better.
There we go.
The Shining from 1980, The Exorcist from 1973, The Blair Witch Project from 1999, and The Blair Witch Project, you still don't know what the hell it was. So what the hell's the point? I mean, what the hell is the point? then the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, which is wasn't that based on like almost like a anyway, moving
Which
right
is
along.
even worse.
Number 1, Funny Games, which is apparently not quite a horror, but it's very on the fine line, and that was in 1997. So don't go watch those. There, I've given you the list. If anybody says watch a most serious movie, you just say Funny Games, 1997,
Shining.
best film
The
ever.
Shining.
Yeah, you see, that's it.
Stephen King.
Yeah, Stephen King. Yeah, there you go. So
Or just go watch Psycho, Although, do you know that the actress that acted in Psycho, right? You know, there's the you know that famous scene in the shower where she gets.
Yeah.
You know that actress.
I've seen that in Bugs Bunny.
she-
Sorry.
after
yeah.
so she obviously acted in that scene.
Yeah.
After watching the movie that she acted in, she could never shower
I'm
again.
not surprised. You see,
She acted in the movie,
see?
so that's the thing
but
with fear.
that puts
She
according
knew
to
the
what you
camera
just
guys
said.
were there.
Yeah.
She knew the whole behind the scenes thing,
Yeah.
and she couldn't shower again
So
after that.
it never releases you.
It's a spirit.
There's
That's the problem.
there's a
Fear is a spirit.
There's a fear there that always it always holds on to you. Something that I did as a kid with one of my very naughty friends is we used to have a website that we used to go to. Guys, I was very young. Okay, very, very young. It was a website, and I don't know why they have this website now that I think about it, but it was a website that there's photos of like the most oddest deaths. I'm talking about like suicides, like full on.
And they show you the photos.
Yes.
Hey!
Like the body, everything, like the most gruesome, weirdest stuff. And still today, like there's stuff that's still that's creepy for me. If I can just it's affected me, people. You understand what I'm saying? All right. I did want to be a paramedic, and after that I cannot be a paramedic. And even paramedics can
You
only
wanted
be
to be a paramedic.
honestly.
You really want That's so cool.
And
You're calm enough to be a paramedic.
but paramedics can only be a paramedic for apparently 20 years.
Yeah, 'cause
and
that
and
gets
then
to trauma.
They actually need, after that, they have to go see a...
Trauma counselor, isn't
That's
it?
it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
That's not natural, people.
It's not.
And neither is that witch thing on the roof.
The cupboard.
I mean, who knocks?
Hey!
Why would a witch knock?
Because of breadcrumbs. We need breadcrumbs.
Can I have some breadcrumbs, please?
Actually, Hansel and Gretel.
Wait. Here's a mockery of it. The breadcrumbs, the knock, hello, and he's eating his bread. Sorry, I'm missing my breadcrumbs. Do you have some butter, please, for my bread?
Peanut butter and jam. What was it? Jam packed. Just go watch Bullet Train.
There you go.
Yeah.
So,
We'll be back next week with something not horrifying.
absolutely.
Maybe we'll look at the psychology behind
hilarious.
drama.
A drama.
The drama.
Good
I enjoy
one.
dramas.
Good one.
I enjoy dramas.
There you go.
There we go.
I prefer actions.
This has been the movie show.
On your favorite RSPs.
Don't be scared.
And stay safe.
Peace.